don't understand. It's over. It's over. America is over. You don't understand. Oh, Hillary. Hillary. We didn't get Hillary. What are we gonna do? We got a white man instead of a white woman. It's not funny, you don't understand. I see white people. It's too much privilege. Too much. It's over. It's over. It's over. America is uh, Donald Trump is president. You know what that means? That means the stock market will go up. Jobs will be created. People have to go to work and stop living in their parents' basements. You're gonna have to give up playing video games and get a job. No! We don't need prosperity in America. We don't. We liked it the way it was under Obama. We liked living in the basement with our parents and playing video games. You don't understand. Trump is gonna make America great, and I don't want a job. Ah!
That is from a video making its way around the internet. One of my former employers sent to me last night, and I took a look at it and found it to be perhaps the best post-election video I've seen on YouTube. If you if you go to YouTube and you search these three words, "America is over," you'll come across that. I would recommend sharing it with just about anyone that you can, in light of what we're seeing with a lot of these, how shall we put it, modern hippies who are trying to burn down cities because they're unhappy with the electoral process in this country. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. First of all, I want to mention to everyone, I know that some of you might be also standing at the ledge thinking about jumping as well after you heard that Mitt Romney could end up as Secretary of State. Some of the biggest Trumpistas that I know are angry with this. I'm judging this by some of the comments I'm seeing on Facebook. How dare he give Mitt Romney a job? Well, all right, do you remember the movie Patton? I've only seen it like 96 times. I bought the video and it's one of those movies I can watch over and over and over again. There is a scene where Patton first arrives to take over in North Africa. I believe it was the 7th Army. Later, he was in command of the 3rd Army in Europe. But he arrives and he's talking to General Omar Bradley. And Bradley says, well, they sent me down just to make sure that everything was going well here. And Patton says, a spy. So Patton gets on the telephone. He calls headquarters and he gets Bradley made his assistant, his chief assistant. In other words, now you're working for me, he tells him. Think about that for a moment. These two men had a bit of a rocky relationship over the last year to 18 months. That's obvious. But the history of the two men, Donald Trump first came to national prominence when he was asked by the then mayor of New York City if he could get a project back on track that was taking place in Central Park. The city of New York had been trying to build an ice skating rink, and it was way behind schedule, and it was way over budget, and the city was being roundly criticized because of the government incompetence, the ineptitude that often happens with big bureaucracies. So after begging Trump to take over the project, and they did this twice in New York, government there asked members of government twice to do it. Finally, the second time, he relented and said, okay, I'll take over the project. He got the project, which was 3 years behind schedule, done in 3 months, and he brought it in under budget. Now, that is how you get a job done. You do it efficiently. Mitt Romney, when he took over the Salt Lake City Olympics, remember, there were some issues there, criminality and fraud, and things were looking dire for getting those Olympic Games off the ground. Romney stepped in and rescued them, very similar to what Trump did with the ice skating rink in Central Park in New York City. So, if nothing else, they have that ability in common to size up a situation and then to take some action on it. Does that mean that translates into diplomacy? No. But Mitt Romney has a reputation as being a nice guy, but also a very shrewd man. And just perhaps, like Patton bringing Bradley on his team, the one way you shut someone up is you put them on your team, and then all of a sudden they're working for you. So for all of the hand-wringing that's going on with all of this, Romney, not only does he look the part, but I think he would be good in that role. And once again, you won't hear Romney making these types of comments.
His economic plans will cause a recession. His foreign policy plans would cause us to be less safe.
So Romney has not been on board with Trump until, of course, we learned that there's going to be a meeting between the two men scheduled for tomorrow. Now, this has thrown a lot of people for a bit of a loop. But when I heard this morning that they'd picked Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, I thought, oh boy, this is wonderful. This is a guy coming from Alabama, conservative legislator from Alabama, who is also a very devout Christian. Running the Justice Department means that we're going to see a repeal of those efforts to intimidate Americans around the country because they will not allow grown men to go in and share a toilet with a little girl or a locker room with a little girl. And he will stop harassing nuns because nuns will not provide abortifacient drugs or contraceptives in organizations that they run for the people who work for them. They'll stop harassing cake bakers. They'll stop harassing wedding photographers. Wonderful. Wonderful. The Romney situation, though, still angers some of my friends. Kellyanne Conway made an appearance last night, for those of you who don't know who she is, and if you've lived under a rock the last 6 months, that is possible. She made the Trump victory possible. That's what she did. She was the woman who came on board late in the campaign and said, all right, focus on these Rust Belt states, focus on this message. She made an appearance on the O'Reilly Factor on Fox News Channel last night. O'Reilly had the night off, but still, you had a pretty good program, and you had a pretty good explanation, I think, from the woman who performed this miracle.
Well, Donald Trump does what businessmen do. He takes the counsel of allies, rivals, people from across the aisle, never-Trumpers in this case, and frankly, in the case of Governor Romney, somebody who did a good job in his state of Massachusetts as governor, ran for president twice, and has a lot to add to the conversation. So I count about 8 meetings that I know of for that same day in New Jersey on Saturday, and Governor Romney will be one of them. And I know Mr. Trump is delighted to welcome him here.
Welcome him in what capacity? Is it interviewing for a job? I mean, the Secretary of State has been floated, but is it to just download him on what's going on, Romney, or to actually interview him for a possible appointment?
Well, that conversation is between the two of them. Eric, I will tell you that not every conversation Mr. Trump is having this week as the president-elect is going to lead to a cabinet position or is going to lead to a senior strategy role. He is a man who listens and who learns, and one listens and learns from him as well, so it's always a two-way street. But as president-elect, he knows it's incumbent upon him to take meetings with any number of people over the phone and in person, from world leaders to sitting legislators and opinion leaders to those, like in the case of Governor Romney, have been through the political fire before, represented the party as its nominee last time around.
There you go. Kellyanne Conway explaining the thinking, at least from the campaign's perspective, about all of this. We should point out, though, that the Trump campaign has floated a lot of names that weren't really under consideration, and this was done to sort of keep the media off balance. Mr. Trump is not obviously friendly with media. Media has not been very good to him. So it is possible that Romney is there for just a bit of a powwow and some input, but could end up in some other role. We don't know yet. Nothing has been announced. But as I said earlier, he just might be the man for the job if you're looking for somebody who's got some brains in his noggin. And he also will quiet some of the critics on the right who've been complaining that Donald Trump isn't conservative enough for them. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. It's 816, it's 22. Telephone number to reach our program today, 736-0300. That's 736-0300. And caller, you're up next. You're on the air.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard about this, but in numerous cases, Trump has had people in his office. And in one case, he had a plumbing contractor in there on a big building. And you can imagine just what an intricate, massive project this could be. And this plumber was talking to him about things, and he didn't totally understand and know. And a week later, he had the same plumbing contractor owner in there, and he knew everything. And that's when he decided to make the decision after he knew for sure what he was going to do. And so, you see, and just like Donald has said, if we listen to him, he tells us, he says, I'm going to get people in a room, look them in the eye, and we're going to get something done. And just like I've said in the past, I deal with business owners across southern Idaho every day. And they're used to a certain pace. They're used to a certain, getting a certain thing done and on a certain schedule. And if you don't do it, they say, well, I'm going to have to find somebody who will. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, thank you much for the telephone call. People who are meeting Trump, Peggy Noonan has a column today where she's sharing all of these critics and refugees and people who say they're afraid of Donald Trump. She tells them that, look, the way the government works here, if Trump doesn't do a good job, he'll be gone and you don't have anything to worry about, okay? But she shares that during the course of the campaign, she didn't interview him, but he got on the telephone with her one day and he had a chat with her. And she says, you'd be surprised just how self-deprecating and humorous, but also how serious he can be about these issues. Got about a minute before the break. You're up next. You're on the air on KLIX. Tell you what, if you want to call back after the break, we have more room for silence, but I don't have a lot of it right now. It's coming up on 20 minutes following 8 o'clock. 23, we just jumped 2 degrees. 23, doesn't that feel warm? All the more reason to make sure that heating unit is working, and you've got to call the pros at Ramsey Heating and Electric for that. Remember, they'll come out and they'll get the job done right. They'll get it done right the first time. We want to point out Ramsey Heating and Electric is located in, I almost said Rupert. They won't like that in Burley. They're located in Burley, and of course, you can reach them by dialing them up. Telephone number happens to be 678-0459, 678-0459. Also, Ramsey Heating and Electric, located at 2600 Overland Avenue in Burley. Remember, they sell warm winters and cool summers. We've got more coming up on this subject in just a couple of minutes on KLIX. I was reading this morning, one of the reasons that we saw Chris Christie demoted and dumped from the transition team was because Christie was loading the team up with lobbyists. Well, if you're going to drain the swamp, you don't want lobbyists involved. The lobbyists, after they got kicked out, were then the people who started saying the Trump transition team was in disarray. Well, the Daily Signal actually shared this tweet from David Axelrod, who was one of the two men who was involved in creating the Barack Obama mystique all the way back in 2008. And Axelrod said, we hadn't made any major appointments at this point in 2008. I don't remember being criticized for it. Gosh, you mean to say that media's hero Barack Obama was running at the same pace that Donald Trump is? No. Good golly. Why won't the media explain that to us? Well, I guess we probably know why. Meanwhile, when Trump criticized the media for claiming that he was in disarray, and he did that, the media got upset. According to Steve Berman over at The Resurgent, then the media criticized Trump for tweeting about the media. They really do think they are gods and goddesses on Olympus. They're still bitter that they couldn't come watch him eat his dinner the other night. But it's tradition, they keep saying. You know, in a whorehouse, so is the clap, but I don't want it. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com, 736-0300. You're up next. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
Well, I'm wonderful, but what's on your mind?
Hey, I was wondering what you think about the idea of now being a good time to maybe approach this electoral college on a state level. I'll give you an example real quick. Up in Washington State,
they had an election for a governor, and every year that they have this election, you win one county, and you win the governorship of the state. And if you look at the United States this year, you can see that the entire map is red except for just a couple of hot pockets of blue.
Well, I don't see any need for change on the state level. We aren't provinces, and if the states themselves would like to individually make the changes, I guess they could do that. Obviously, in places like Maine and Nebraska, they divide up. They divvy up the electoral college votes according to that how the vote is actually done. Nebraska has 2 districts, so does Maine. But I don't see any serious need to tell states that they need to do this. That would be a decision the people in those individual states obviously would have to make. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story. It's 8:26. It's 23. Go ahead.
Well, Bill, you can't reach across the aisle any more than having Henry Kissinger come in to have a conversation with you. I mean, this guy, was KGB agent. He was the one, as Secretary of State, got the Shah of Iran deposed in 79, I believe it was. And Ayatollah Khomeini came in. The Shah of Iran, Christians and Muslims were getting along really well in Iran at that time. And we had this pastor, Sharon Hadian, that came here and pointed out what happened when the Ayatollah came in and totally put in the brutal Muslim Islamic regime. And Kissinger also deposed Ian Smith in Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, and Mugabe's been in there. It was the breadbasket of Africa, and now they can't even feed their own because they drove off all the ranchers and the farmers and the food producers.
I'll add to this too that indirectly, he's the de facto creator of OPEC. In other words, after they objected to our support of Israel in the war in 1973, his trade-off was to convince them that they could put together this oil cartel, and then they had the embargo and destroyed the U.S. economy we've never recovered.
Well, yeah, Henry Kissinger is definitely the enemy. He really messed things up, and we can almost attribute to his State Department for all of the things that have happened since then, that 36, 37 years now, that have this brutal regime, and they're putting spread their terror network around, ISIS, Hamas, you name it, they're all coming out of Iran. And so, but for him to reach across the aisle that much, but I think Trump is really smart. I think I was talking to some people last night, and I think he realizes by bringing in Romney and these guys, that he's willing to make concessions in that regard, at least to show that he's willing to talk to these people, get their ideas. And I think he's extremely intelligent to be able to glean the best from those people and forget the worst.
I would agree with that. Thank you. And I think that the whole Kissinger visit was done mainly as a courtesy. Kissinger does have some knowledge of the world too, as well. Whether he's a very sinister figure, but he does understand how the world works. In fact, he engages in that Bismarck-style realpolitik, and it's just been unfortunate that he's left such a trail of carnage behind him. Coming up on 8:30, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Want to tell you about my friends at Waddell & Reed, a great investment firm located right here in Twin Falls. Been doing this. In fact, they've been in business now, 8 decades. Can you imagine that? They're offering mutual funds, and they're offering 2. Most firms only offer 1, and most firms really just got on the bandwagon in the last 25 years with that. But Waddell & Reed has been doing it for decades. They know what they're doing. If you've been in business 80 years, obviously you know what you're doing. What they like to do, though, is work with you as an individual, knowing that each individual has different needs, different hopes. And what they'll do is they'll craft the plan for you, and they won't gamble it away like a casino. They'll actually work with you to set something up that will be, in the long run, the best plan for you. They take planning personally. We're going to be talking to the gun guys coming up after 9 o'clock news this morning. That's ahead with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com. I was listening to the message from Depot Grill about preparing Thanksgiving meals in advance. And I think I'm going to pick up one of those, at least one. I already have plans for Thanksgiving Day, but I thought, you know what? I can go in Wednesday and pick something up there, and then I can eat it over the course of the weekend. And I can eat anything I want. I just have to watch when I eat it, how much I eat of it, as long as I have some calorie limitations. But I can do that as well because, as some of you know, I've been dieting, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's been pretty simple. Actually, I do it through the Total Body Transformation System, which promotes healthy weight loss and wellness. It's not a fad diet. It is scientifically proven. Your doctor will approve. It's in fact, it uses a lot of what you might call rare but natural ingredients and can actually speed your fat burn, and you'll lose much more weight, 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise alone. I mean, it's just incredible what it can do, and it's been supported by major universities around the country, Columbia, Cornell, Tufts, many other prestigious universities. The average participant is going to lose 22 pounds over just 60 days. Now, for a lot of you people out there listening, that's really all you may be thinking about. For this time of year too, you will maybe want to eat well at Thanksgiving and as well at Christmas, but in the days in between, you want to really watch what you're eating. This is the diet for you. It's all natural and scientifically validated, and we want to point out too, it's backed up with an unconditional full money-back guarantee. Don Chandler, who used to own the tuck shop here in town, and many of you know him very, very well. Don lost 50 pounds on this diet, looks great, looks younger, feels great too. You can reach him for more details. You can give him a telephone call, of course, area code 208-731-3560. I'd like to stress that again. Don's telephone number, if you're trying to write this down, you know the area code, 208. It's 731-3560. That's 731-3560. And you know what? You look great. And that's what you really are thinking about. And you're thinking, too, about how to keep up that pace in life, living a long life, living maybe disease-free, all of those things. Weight loss will help assist with that. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 24. There is a story in the Washington Post today, and in fact, our last caller is quoted generously in it. The story is about the refugee resettlement program and the election of Donald Trump. Yours truly is quoted, but yours truly is referred to only as the local Fox radio host. Now, first of all, we carry Fox News. We pay dearly to carry Fox News at the top of each hour. But Fox does not sign my paycheck. I don't work for Fox. It's good for branding purposes, but I don't work for them. But I'm quoted as saying, apparently I said something to the effect that refugees are spending your tax dollars with their food stamps and local grocery stores. No, they don't use food stamps anymore. Government thought that created a stigma, so you get an EBT card, which looks like a debit card, and you can use that. But it is true. You pay for that. I mean, your taxes cover those programs or whatever the government can borrow, which it has not yet paid back. But what gets me about this, and I don't think the reporter, I think he did a really good job, to be honest with you. But I think what happens is they do 3 or 4 days of interviews, then they get a stack of notes, and then they've got to go back through and look through the quotes and recreate a story from that. And what I had said, and this gets lost sometimes in that translation. What I have said is that people might get along a little bit better in this community if the refugees were told by the refugee center that all of these things they get, the assistance for rent and the food assistance and everything else, that generous people in this country make that possible when they pay their taxes. And then the refugees might say thank you to some neighbors, and maybe that would at least start a dialogue here and people could get along a little bit better. It doesn't change my mind about the program, and it shouldn't necessarily change yours. But that's the full conversation I had with the reporter pointed that out. And all you get is a quote making me look like Simon LeGree. Ah, they're spending your tax dollars. They're the people who are keeping you in poverty. We need to get rid of them ASAP. But what I was actually saying was, no, if they would just understand then they might feel that, okay, we're not all being mean to them and that we're actually pretty decent people. That'd be a good start, wouldn't it? Coming up at 8:39, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Do want to remind you, if you're hearing the show this morning, you're listening, I want to say thank you. But if you're having a difficult time listening, you need to get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. She'd like to open your world to new sounds and experiences. A new hearing device is available which works with the brain to help those with hearing loss hear more naturally than any previous aid on the market. She's offering a 2-week free trial with these new devices. You can call today to schedule your personal fitting appointment. Open your world to better hearing. Call Mount Harrison Audiology, the telephone number 312-0957. That's 312-0957. Liberals are still out of control when it comes to Trump's election. There's a college professor who is now apparently wearing a straitjacket and locked up in a rubber room. We'll tell you why, because, and by the way, he's a friend of Rachel Maddow's over at MSDNC. Maybe they'll take her away too. Well, we've already seen one miracle. Maybe there are more on the way. And about 15 minutes left in what I would call the regulation time. And actually, we'll have guests today, and that's still regulation, I suppose. But the whole notion is we take this last hour of the show on Fridays to have a conversation, and we talk about firearms safety, firearms training, your Second Amendment rights. Keep in mind, this week alone, we've had 2 stories out across the country that, and likely there are more, but in Florida, a man who was wailing on a police officer was told to stop by a bystander, and he refused to do it. So the bystander said, all right, well, then I'll have to shoot you. And the guy kept wailing on the cop. So the bystander shot the guy and killed him. One less criminal that we'll have to feed now for the next 30 or 40 years. And then in Pennsylvania, 2 guys came into a pizza shop, were going to rob it. There was a customer eating. They thought they'd pistol whip the customer, but they didn't know the customer was packing heat. And the customer shot the 2 of them. One of them is dead. The other one may never walk again, but they won't be robbing any more pizza shops now, will they? All the more reason that a good guy with a gun can still play the role of equalizer, and often does. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 8:44. It's 23. I do want to point out, coming up next Wednesday, we'll be joined in studio by Dr. Jonathan Tripp, or one of his associates from Tripp Family Medicine here in Twin Falls. We do this every Wednesday between 8:30 and 9 o'clock. It's an opportunity, too, for you to call and get some medical advice from a friendly voice here on the radio. We wanted to point out as well that Dr. Tripp's office is still looking for new patients. And generally, if you're a patient and you need someone to take a look at you, if you've got an ailment bothering you, you get up in the morning, you give them a call, they can often get you in on the very same day. Dr. Tripp's office is located on Fillmore Street in Twin Falls, directly across from the main post office. I do want to point out they have a great slogan, life's too short not to feel good. Telephone number, if you'd like to reach our program this morning, 736-0300, 736-0300. Story coming out of the Resurgent, a writer by the name of Steve Berman says that the mainstream media has no moral authority to condemn something called the alt-right. Media has decided, by the way, that anybody who is not a moderate Republican, as if there is such a thing, anyone who is not a moderate Republican is therefore dangerous because, well, you're not a liberal at all. And, you don't support all of our liberal causes, the destruction of the United States and moral debauchery. And so, therefore, you're a bad guy and you must be a racist bigot. Well, the writer goes on to talk a little bit about how media, take the Huffington Post. He says they've given for years a platform to people like Jeremiah Wright and Al Sharpton. You don't think those guys are racist bigots? Louis Farrakhan. I mean, it goes on with a list here, and points out that all of these people who are screaming and yelling about the appointment of Steve Bannon as the White House advisor simply have no moral ground to stand on because of that. And we should also point out, Mr. Bannon, there was a Jewish writer in Washington Times yesterday who said he worked with Bannon at Breitbart and said Bannon was one of the nicest people he ever met. And he said this whole notion that he's a racist and anti-Semitic is just baloney. And the guy said he left Breitbart because he said Bannon had a different philosophy than founder Andrew Breitbart had. But Bannon then, took the paper in another direction. That's fine. But the writer said he didn't leave because he had a personal issue with Bannon at all. He just wanted to go do something else with his life. And he said a couple of years later, Bannon was in London visiting and discovered that this writer was also in London. And he called him up and invited him to get together. What you have, though, is he gave a voice to people who don't normally get a voice. Look, if someone on the alt-right, as it's called, whatever it happens to be, and it may be a small number of people, Glenn Beck said you might be talking tops 2 million people nationwide. The fact of the matter is they pay taxes for the most part. They have jobs. They're contributing to this country. Why shouldn't they have a voice? You may not like it, but, we get all of the leftist kooks. I mean, MSDNC gives them a forum every day. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Even if you don't like their opinions, at least you see the opinion and you can make a judgment based on that. It's not like you hear somebody and you go, yes, I must follow everything you say. Look into my eyes. You are getting sleepy. We have a caller with us. Caller, you're up next. You're on KLIX.
Thank you. Good morning. And I just saw a tweet from Donald Trump that he and Bill Ford together decided that they're not moving the Lincoln plant to Mexico. That's in their plants in Kentucky. So he's already starting to work to make America great again. So
and some of the jobs that Ford has in Mexico are coming back too.
Yay, team. All right. Just wanted to let you know. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. A Drudge report has a great lead on that. Drudge shows a great big American flag with the story. In other words, some of these corporate executives are realizing they aren't citizens of the world, but they're Americans too. And perhaps the patriotism is finally going to win out there, and they'll do the right thing. Bill Colley, as I said, with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com, 736-0300, 736-0300. It's 24, coming up on 8:49. I do have to mention this because Trump's job is not an easy job. That this notion that he's going to go into Washington and he's going to get people on board. You still have even Republicans in Congress who are trying to bring back pork barrel spending. You had to get rid of Chris Christie from the transition team because he was loading it up with lobbyists who are looking to get special favors and control the government as they have for a very long time. Trump is in a very dangerous position. You have one CEO of a company in this country who already had to resign his position because he threatened to kill Trump, even going so far as to describing how he would do it publicly. And, these are people who are very dangerous. This comes from a publication called Media Research Center. A white Rutgers professor is given a psychiatric evaluation after threatening to kill whites. In the wake of the election of President-elect Donald Trump, adjunct lecturer Kevin Allred made an array of comments on Twitter about his feelings toward white people. Allred, who is white, has said he believes there are no good white people, that white people are a problem, and that Trump being elected is all white people's fault. And then he went on to say, that he wanted to kill all white people. One of his students told the administration, and the next thing that happened was some guys in an ambulance and some white coats showed up, and they wrapped him in a white coat, a straitjacket, and they hauled him away, and he is now being evaluated in a psychiatric hospital. Yeah, Lefty, you just keep it up, because if we can lock you all away, you won't be able to come and vote the next time, and we'll have that Republican majority for a long, long time. But Trump's job is just enormous. Ron Nate, State Representative Ron Nate from over on the eastern side of Idaho, had a newspaper column yesterday. I don't know if it'll get picked up here in Twin Falls. It should. It was really good. But he talks about how the government just simply cannot, federal government, cannot afford to keep doing what it's doing. And he also points out that when it comes to Idaho's transportation fund, half of that is coming from the federal government. And the government is picking up a lot of other costs in Idaho. And when that gravy train stops, how are we going to be prepared to deal with that on the state level? Donald Trump's job is to try to figure out how to navigate this from the federal level, but you're also going to have brave people in politics on the state level and local level to figure all of these things out, too. We've got a caller with us. Caller, you're on the air at 8:51 on KLIX. Go ahead.
Yes, a member of the alt-right calling. Anyway, Just a couple of quick comments. One of them is the complaining or blaming of Comey regarding the timing of his efforts on trying to be sure that the email thing was done. They bring that up, but what I fail to hear the people saying is that Comey didn't write the email, and he didn't own the server, and who's Hillary just doesn't take responsibility for what she did.
Well, yeah, she wouldn't have been in this trouble if she hadn't done it in the first place.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been an issue if she hadn't had the server, written the emails, and the emails that, and then, the Russians did it. But the Russians didn't write Podesta's emails either.
Well, and the Russians, like the Chinese and everybody else, they do spying just like our own government does. And if you have a homebrew server, then the Russians and the Chinese could crack the codes and manage to get into it and be reading all of your correspondence anyway. So she made that possible.
Just made it easy, Anyway, and then one other observation is, and that is, from the standpoint of the popular vote, how many people would Trump have gotten if he'd had the wind at his back instead of the headwinds from all of the other sources of communication?
A lot of Republicans refused to vote for him. They told other Republicans not to vote for him. You had the media against him, and then you had millions of illegal aliens and convicted felons voting.
Yeah, so, if he'd have had the wind at his back, just how much of a landslide would it have been?
Oh.
Anyway, those are my thoughts.
45, 46 states. I thank you much for the call. He would have racked up probably 350 electoral votes before it was all said and done. And media doesn't want you to know that, and they don't want to blame Hillary for. It's like the guy who's speeding down the interstate. He's driving at 110 miles per hour, and then he drives off the road and he careens into an embankment and he wrecks his car and he's 3 sheets to the wind, and then he blames the police for giving him a hard time. Well, dude, follow the rules. Drive safely. Drive sober. Stay within the speed limit. Hillary Clinton is that drunken driver. And to sit here and blame the cops for what happened is a bunch of baloney. I have to clean that up and say baloney because, I'm on the radio. 8:54, Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. The website means you can hear us anywhere all over the world just by clicking on the Listen Live button. And some people working in offices have to do that because, difficulty receiving radio signals depending on the type of building that you happen to be in. This is what Representative Ron Nate had to say in his column in the Rexburg Standard Journal. Idaho, like many other states, is moored to the federal sinking ship. And he goes on to point out that in the Department of Environmental Quality here in Idaho, more than half the budget is coming from the federal government, and for transportation, nearly half of the $496 million in appropriations in federal dollars. The federal budget, he writes, is doomed. It simply cannot sustain its current course. In other words, they'll have to have cuts. They're simply not. China's going to call our note, or some of the sovereign wealth funds from some of the Islamic nations that have underwritten much of our debt, and American taxpayers are exhausted. Yes, we are paying for everybody else's food stamps and their rental assistance and their heating assistance and their cooling assistance. You got to think about it, folks. When you're spending twice what you're bringing in, it will not last. And all of you people out there who say, yes, but I paid into it, well, we've fed a lot of dead horses in our lives, haven't we? The problem is a dead horse, you can't have it get up and you can't ride it. So it's the woman who once called me and said that she was going to get her Social Security come heck or high water because I paid into it, is what she told me. And I said, well, yeah, but you and whose army? Are you going to march to Washington on your own and start beating people up and snatching the money out of the Treasury if there's any left? You paid a tax. The government squandered it, like it squandered everything else for decades and decades and decades. And so, yeah, okay, you paid into it. I'm going to get it back. Well, with what? How are you going to get it back? You know, It's like saying, well, the casino tricked me. I didn't get 3 lemons or 3 oranges or 3 whatever it was, so therefore I'm going to smash the machine and take my money back. No, you're not. Not going to work that way. So Nate's point is that if you're running a state government, he's not popular among his fellow Republicans because, gosh, how dare you talk that way? We don't want the people to actually know what's really coming, not until we're out of office. It's like these guys who go around and they give businesses money to relocate in their communities, your tax dollars. Oh, we need to do this to further jobs. And then 5 years later, the company closes its doors and moves to Asia. And the jobs are gone and your money is gone. But, the politicians who do that, number one, figure, well, we'll come up with some other con or we'll be long gone by the time that happens and nobody's going to catch up with us. So when you get a Ron Nate or a Heather Scott or a Christy Zitto that come along and say, whoa, wait a minute, that makes everybody else in government uncomfortable because it threatens their gravy train as well. Gadzooks, we may have to tell the public the truth. And if we tell them the truth, we won't be able to keep getting reelected. And then we won't be able to hold on to all the great benefits that we provided ourselves that the public will never get. These politicians, some of them are so incredibly devious. And I'm not saying all of them. And some of them are trying. But this is the type of thing that your new president is going to be going up against. And that inertia is just so incredible. You got to pray for him. That's what you got to do. When you have nothing else left, it's funny. Prayer is always the last thing you turn to, isn't it? Bill Cowley with you. Yes. God-fearing, self-righteous pomposity every Monday through Friday here on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. 9 o'clock news from Fox is just ahead. It's 24, and we're going to be talking about firearms in the next hour of the program. And if you've got a comment or question, we're going to have a couple of people in studio who will try to help you out, maybe set you on the right course, give you the right advice. So, in fact, this time of year, you might think about some gifts, maybe buying someone a training class or, for Christmas, maybe even buying them something to defend themselves with. All that's coming up in just a few minutes.